Hi, this is Doug with 8-Twit Engineering, and this is a tutorial on how to make your own boomerang out of strips of wood. Just like this. So first, just to prove this boomerang works, here's some clips of me throwing it. I just recorded this today for you, the viewer, on a 5-degree Fahrenheit day with high winds, so I didn't get a catch like I wanted to, but here it is. Alright, pretty good action shots, right? Yeah, so the main technique to making this style of boomerang is steam bending. So don't get intimidated, but steam bending is how I've accomplished this 90-degree bend here. And so the first step in this whole process is to make a jig for your steam bending. This is called a jig or a caul, C-A-U-L, or just a form. And that's what I have right here. So the wood strips go right here, and then with a clamp, you're basically pressing the strips of wood into form. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. To make this form, very simple. This is probably like the easiest skill-wise part of the whole thing. So I'm just taking plywood here. Looks like it's 0.75 inches thick. And you want to just use a compass to draw your boomerang arc on the plywood. So like, imagine this piece of paper is the plywood, and use the compass to draw two 90-degree arcs, and the difference in diameter of the arcs is how thick you want your boomerang to be. And yeah, then you just cut away this portion that I've hashed right here, and you're left with this outer piece and then this inner piece. To do this, you can do this with a scroll saw or maybe even a table saw. I personally just did it by hand, where I got close to the cutting lines and then I used a rounded a half moon file to just smooth out the curves. The curves you don't have to be like CNC precision here. It's just got to be like roughly the curve that you want. Two more details to this. You can see I've beveled the form right here, and it did an inner bevel right here, and that's just so that at least one of the clamps, basically the primary clamp that's doing the bending, has a flat flat bevel to squeeze against. Now, to attach this top part, I've just put in some screws. So nothing crazy. It's not like this is absorbing a lot of force, like shear force or anything. So you could probably even use wood glue here. So the boomerang I made, I just chose it to be, let's see, 1.75 inches wide, its wings. But I would suggest, if you don't have much experience with boomerangs, buy a cheap wooden boomerang or plastic boomerang, or it may come out of graphite too. So just so you have a reference point, so you can play around with it and see how big you want to make it. Alright, so once you got your form, your jig, your caul, whatever you want to call it, all set, then it's time to move on to making the actual boomerang itself. So when I made my boomerang, I had a bunch of these kind of strips of wood available, so this is just what I used. These are 1.5 inches wide, and so these, yeah, you can see how it already bends by itself a little bit. But obviously I need to cut these lengthwise into a strip. So I did this by hand, as you can see right here, with a hand saw. Much easier would be to use a table saw or a band saw, obviously. But yeah, you can do it with a hand saw too. It doesn't have to be super precise. The line just has to be roughly right down the center. Now, obviously, your boomerang isn't going to be this thick. It's not going to be 0.75 inches thick. My boomerang ended up being just 0.25 inches thick instead of 0.75. But one of the reasons I kept it thick, just so I have a lot of room for air, and also makes the steam bending process a little more stable. Like, I felt like if the strips were too thin, then it would be easy for things to get out of alignment. And yeah, yeah, that's about how thick the plywood is 0.75 inches. So it just makes everything match up nice and clean, even though it means I'll have to take off more material later, as we'll see. So after you have all your strips of wood cut lengthwise, you have to make your pattern. So the woods I chose were purpleheart, maple, and cherry. And yeah, you can see the pattern that I made here. You can see how wide the boomerang is. And I chose to have the purpleheart as the outer edge because this is the hardest, toughest wood. And so it's good for absorbing hits if the boomerang hits a rock. If you're on a soccer field, it hits a goal post, it hits a tree. I mean, this thing has dinged just about everything, and I don't even see a ding in its edge. I remember one time I threw it and it kind of got out of control and it flew way like 200 yards away and just slammed into the top of my car and left a dent in the car, and yet there was nothing on the boomerang. So yeah, purpleheart for the edge is a very good choice. So you have all your strips of wood, you have them arranged in the order you want. Now is the time to steam it. So you can see just a pot of water with some aluminum foil. You can see this strap that I've clamped onto the boards. This is just in preparation for the steam bend. So steam bending is a little deeper of a topic, but this is a very simple case, so I'm just going to try to describe it very quickly here. You want this strap of material so that the direction you're bending in, it just mitigates the possibility for that outer strip of wood to splinter or crack. It just provides a kind of support while you're pushing it into the form. And when wood is steamed, you only have like a minute or two before it loses that wet noodle kind of pliability. So you don't want to be spending that time putting that strap on the outside. You just want it ready to go so you can slap it into your form immediately. And as a rule of thumb with steam bending, they say 1 inch of wood requires 1 hour of steam. Here I don't know exactly how the rule applies, because you're dealing with individual pieces of wood, and but I just kept it in there for about an hour just from past experience with other kind of steam bending projects. It was probably even a little too much, but you can't steam it too much, so it's fine. I'd say an hour and a half. You can kind of get a feel for it too. You'll feel when it's weak. So after an hour of steaming, yeah, you want everything right in your kitchen nearby your stovetop, all ready to go. You want your clamps arranged. You do a practice run, but without the steaming, just to make sure that you're gonna be able to grab things and clamp it in really quick. Just have everything ready to go, because again, you only have a minute or two. But yeah, you can see what this looks like with the, you can see that strap still in there to support the outer purpleheart strip to prevent it from cracking. Might not be necessary, but doesn't hurt. And you only need 3 clamps at this point. And yeah, you leave it in there for an hour or two. And after you take it out, you can see all these strips have a nice bend to them. And normally with steam bending, they're going to probably go back, so they won't be at a 90-degree angle when you when you take them out and as they dry, they'll kind of try to go back to being straight just a little bit, but that's no big deal. We got the major bend that we wanted. So that bend was just in preparation for the wood gluing step. And I will say, if you have like really thin strips of wood, you might be able to even skip the steam bending. So experiment on your own. You might be able to just glue it directly. I felt more comfortable pre-steam bending everything and then gluing it. But yeah, the glue I used is Titebond III. This is waterproof, stress. This is the best wood glue on the market, in my opinion. And so you want to, and same thing here, time is of the essence with this, because you have 13 strips of wood that have to be glued, which means 12 glue joints, right? So you have to do that pretty quick, because by the time you get to that last joint, the glue on the first joint is starting to dry, starting to do its thing. But once you got that, do it with a roller like you see, and press it in there. Here I used more clamps than for the steam bending because I want the glue to have a tight bond at all locations. With the steam bending, I was only focused on the bend, but here I'm focused on all parts of the boomerang. You'll probably notice that some of your strips like raise up relative to the other strips, so just tap them down, make sure everything's flat. The steam bending and the gluing are the most stressful parts of this because of the time aspect. Alright, it's all glued up. You can see what it looks like now after the gluing, just all pretty rough and ragged. And now we're just going to square off the ends with a chop saw. And so like I said, the strips I was using were about 0.75 inches, 3/4 of an inch, so way thicker than I needed to be. So that's where I pay for it here partially. So you see I'm taking a handsaw and literally just planing this boomerang down. If you do have a plane or any other type of way to do it, I would suggest that, but this is what I did. Now you can see how that extra piece of wood that I planed off with the handsaw, and hey, you might even be able to use this you might even be able to get 2 boomerangs out of it this way. And here's that extra strip that I cut off. You can see it's just a little too thin and bendy, I think, to make another boomerang from, but who knows. Alright, now it comes time to round off those square ends and make the airfoil shape that makes the boomerang spin around in a big arc like it does. So airfoil looks like this. You can kind of see how I achieved that right here. So you want to get it into just an airfoil shape, and again I would recommend buying a boomerang and using it for reference. So just visually, you're going to be fine-tuning it later as you throw it, but you just want to get it as close as possible. So just a bit of theory into why you're making an airfoil shape. So you're throwing the boomerang like this. The blunt ends of the airfoil are here and here. So these are the ends that are leading right into the air as you're throwing. And the blunt ends make it so that there is a low pressure zone above the wing and a high pressure zone under the wing. So the air is going faster underneath and slower on top of the airfoil. And that's what pushes the wing up. Then you have one wing going faster than the other at any given time. All right, so if I throw it, this wing is going faster at this point than this wing. That means it's curving more. So that's basically how the boomerang arcs through the air. And I will say this is like a bumblebee wings. Like as far as physics, like nobody quite understands 100% how a boomerang works. It just kind of does. And so one of the challenges with that is that you can't necessarily design a boomerang to act a certain way. You can get like a rough kind of behavior out of a boomerang, but don't be trying to agonize over your design. Keep it simple and use trial and error to hone in on the specific flight pattern that you're trying for. All right, so after a lot of draw knife work and filing and rasping and scraping, you should have a airfoil design that you are happy with. So I would, at this point, go outside and find a big field and give it a few test throws and make sure it's behaving roughly how you want. It doesn't have to be a final fit or anything. So what I did now is, even though my aerofoil isn't fine-tuned how I want it, I did coat it with its protective gloss coating. And for what I use there is Epiphanes, I don't even know how to pronounce it, Epiphanes marine grade varnish. So this was the most hardcore varnish I could find, and because I wanted, if you throw in a boomerang, you know it takes a lot of abuse. It's sticking into the ground, hitting stones, hitting trees, hitting goalposts, and you want the wood obviously waterproof and protected as much as possible. Now, why did I put the varnish on before I was finished with the shaping? Well, I figured that the varnish was going to both add weight to the boomerang, and it was going to possibly affect the aerodynamics at the surface, like just the micro currents or something, kind of like how a golf ball has, the surface of a golf ball changes its flight patterns, like a baseball. So both of those might be total BS, but I was just erring on the side of safety. So after I got it varnished up, I took it back out, threw it again. It did seem to me like it made a small bit of difference. But this is the point where I started fine-tuning it. So the varnish on the bottom, that just stays how it is. The varnish and on the edges. What you're doing is scraping material off the top of the aerofoil. And how I did that was I just took a sharp knife with me out to the field, and I put the knife perpendicular to the surface of the wood and just scrape off little tiny slivers. This is ideal because you can push as hard as you want and you're just going to be getting little tiny shavings off the aerofoil. There's no way to make a huge mistake and like gouge into the boomerang. So yeah, like you can see these little shavings coming off. So just like that, your boomerang's main problem is probably just going to be that it's really heavy. And that is one of the things that I kind of like about this boomerang. It's much heavier than other boomerangs, and therefore it's easier to use it in windy conditions. So in my experience, there's always windy conditions. There's never a clear day. I have all these really nice light boomerangs that can fly like 200 yards and just come right back to you if there's no wind. If there's wind, then forget it. They're all over the place. Whereas this thing can kind of just bludgeon through the wind, and you can use the wind in an easier way to get the kind of throw you want. So this is one of the heaviest boomerangs I've ever used, and keeping it that way. Okay, so after you're done scraping, you've scraped all the varnish off the top of the boomerang. So just put some varnish right back on there. Put another coat or two. Like I said, the bottom and the sides are already varnished up, so you can just lay it on the table and varnish it from there. To do the initial varnish, I forgot to mention, you can see that little hole in the back that I covered. I filled it with putty, but I had an eye screw in there, and then I just hung the boomerang from my ceiling, and that's how I was able to coat the whole thing at once for the initial varnishing. So that's it. I hope this tutorial was helpful. Yeah, if you've never used a boomerang before, yeah, if you're into throwing frisbee, boomerangs are some next level shit. So I would suggest going to buy one, and then making your own is very, very educational. And I hope this tutorial helps you in that education. So please like, share, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.